I think it was in May. And it was like 95 degrees in his shop. And I was like, I couldn't hardly do anything. I was
Dying
just
in the
standing around.
corner.
I was just standing around watching because it's like, how do you guys work in this? This is
Oh, yeah.
ridiculous.
Welcome back to the Craftsman's Collective, a podcast designed to help makers in the concrete, wood, and steel industries improve their businesses and lives by discussing our common struggles, tips we found along the way, and how we can combine our unique perspectives to create even more spectacular pieces. My guest today is Phil Courtney of CreteWRX, Alaska. In this episode, we talk about the importance of getting good at the business side of things, regardless of whether you consider yourself an artist, an entrepreneur, or something else altogether. As usual, check the chapters or show notes for timestamps if you're looking for something specific, and any resources we mention will be there as well, with affiliate links if you'd like to help support this channel. Thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoy. I like to start with what is your story? Like, I don't really know much of your background at all. I have the one thing that you said in one of the chats that really piqued my interest was you said something along the lines of the concrete side of your business never really took off until you took it seriously.
Yeah.
Um, I really want to know your story, because that when somebody says something along those lines really intrigues me as far as like how that even came to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of a mindset thing. But I was I worked for my dad for 15 years. I mean, since I was young, 19. Um, and we did everything, remodels, new, built, basically built additions, almost like new houses. They were like
Mm-hmm.
year, 2 year long projects. And as I grew up, I kind of managed that crew. We had a few people working for us at one point. And then we did a lot of specialty like bathroom remodels, a lot of walk-in showers, that kind of things, like high-end tile. Um, so then about 2013, I went out on my own and was doing the same thing because that's what I knew. So I was doing
Mm-hmm.
additions and remodels and kind of specialized on bathrooms a lot, walk-in showers, like custom tile work and stuff. And then I had a request for like a custom concrete vanity. I'd never done one
Mm-hmm.
before. And so we did like most of us do. We just do what we see, online. We just mix
Mm-hmm.
up basic concrete and we don't know really what we're doing.
Oh
And
yeah.
and so made that one. It actually is cool. It's still cool to this day. It actually has held up really well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but did that, and then I was like, wow, this is really fun. And I'd been in construction and demo and remodel for so long that it was kind of cool because it was something different. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was really intrigued by just being able to just make stuff, and not like just be in the construction industry, everything. But
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I just went from there, one project after another. But it wasn't until probably 2000, and then 3 years later, kind of one little project at a time, one little project. I got more. Then I did a kitchen. Then I did this. Then I did that. It's just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
one after another. And for a long time, I was just for maybe like one little concrete project a month, or like fabrication project,
Oh yeah.
furniture. Um, and I never really thought I could do any more than that. I just was like, there's no demand. There's no way I could sell that, sell enough concrete projects or furniture or whatever to actually like make a living. And it wasn't until probably, man, time flies so fast. But now I
It
want to say
does.
it's like 2017, maybe 18. I don't know. It's just like I'm trying to think back. I think it's like 4.5 years now that I've been full time. And it was just at that point that I had a bunch of additions on my schedule, or people who wanted them. I hadn't quite scheduled them yet, but I had pretty much my entire summer booked out. Lots of money. And I just said, no, I'm going to stop, because if I don't just stop and say no, I'll never be able to do what I wanted to do. And that was just fabricate. I just wanted to just work in my shop and build stuff. And I mean, there's times where you have to do what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no work, you have to do something. So there's times in between there that I did pick up a couple small jobs for maybe like a week. Usually it's for like old past clients that just beg me and beg me and beg me. And so I did it, did those. But for the most part, I was 100% concrete or fabrication in my shop. And, I did some woodwork, but it was
So,
quite the move.
but how did you? Because some people never make that jump, and it's always. I don't think you can ever really get an honest answer from someone when they're like, "Well, I really want to do this thing," and you kind of ask, "Well, then why don't you do that thing?" And
Yeah,
so how did you like? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't even occur. I mean, it took me years for some of the stuff that I do now. Like it just didn't even occur to me to try it. Like, so how did you even
yeah,
get to the point where that was even a thought process of being like, well, I want to do this thing over here, but this thing that's bringing in all this money is taking up all my time. Like that's a pretty big jump for
yeah.
I mean a lot of people to make. Like, how did you even?
That's a scary jump, and that was the scary because whenever I just decided that said no, I'm not going to do that. Um, I really didn't have any work, um, so I had some money saved up, maybe a little bit,
Mm-hmm,
and I had I had some small little concrete projects coming, but it's kind of a faith thing. I mean, and I feel like if you just make that decision, um, you make it work. It motivates you. It highly motivates you when you don't have that plan B,
mm-hmm,
um, the fallback on, and you just do it. And it wasn't super super easy that first year at all. It's a lot of work, and I didn't make near the money I had been making. Um, but you just stick with it. And it's easy to look back on now because I'm like, oh yeah,
oh
it
yeah,
wasn't that big of a deal. But I remember then it was
I
pretty
made it.
scary. Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
scary, because I had no idea what was going to happen if I could actually make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are. I guess, and I'm doing better now. But
Yeah, that's something that I've heard said many times is like you don't hear from the people who went for it and didn't make it, right? Like
right, right.
they either don't talk about it or like it's not like a story that anybody is gonna talk about. But is that like a route that you would sug advocate might be a little bit too strong of a word, but suggest to someone who is considering doing something new, whether it's like they're a lawyer and they want to be a woodworker, or they're like you were in the construction industry and you want to do nothing but
Yeah.
concrete or steel work, for example. It,
It's funny. I've heard a lot of people talk about this in different types of trades or industries,
mm-hmm,
and the people who have just gone in, just done it with no plan B. If we make it, if we're able to do something with it, you know, it's always great. But then looking back, I would tell somebody, well, maybe like have some maybe have some like money put away, like
mm-hmm,
so you're not super stressed about it. Like if that's what you want to do, just put a goal for, okay, at the end of the year, I'm going to save as much money as I can, squirrel away, like really focus down. And you don't
mm-hmm,
have to know everything, because I think a lot of times, I've heard it said, if you wait till you're 100% sure, you're too late.
mm-hmm.
um, so if you try and plan everything out, um, it's not going to work. You're just going to pass your time. Um,
Yeah, like if you wait till you're ready, you'll never be ready or something like that.
right, right. And
Yeah.
so you're never going to have enough
Mm-hmm,
money to where you're going to be solely financially secure that you can't fail. You
mm-hmm.
know, so you just have to go for it, and just do it. And
How like so during that first year when you're like full stop on the other and full start on the other, what were some of the things that Here, let's actually divide that into two things. What were some of the things that you did that absolutely did not work, and you would say for somebody
Mm.
who is considering starting it, like you should avoid like this one or two things if at all possible? Because we all
Oh
gonna
man.
make stupid decisions, right? And some of us make those same stupid decisions multiple times.
Huh.
But is there anything that just really sticks out? But like I did this, and I would not recommend it.
Oh man, these are tough questions, dude. I'm not really good with off the cuff, but
I'm working at getting better.
yeah, yeah. Um, I off the top of my head, I know there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that I used to do, and I still
Hmm.
struggle with. I guess I can go that route.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I mean, what are a couple of those
but
things?
just being better at the business side of things,
Mhm,
because we all focus on, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to make, um, and we're not, we're just being in business for yourself is completely different,
mhm,
because there's the sales side and the business side and the money. I think if I did it over again, I would really have talked to an accountant maybe, or somebody with that was, and really help me set up my books and where to
mhm,
put the money and how to divide the money in the beginning, because that caused a lot of stress for the first few years, and I don't
mhm.
feel like I figured that out really, and that's still something I'm still working on, but until the last couple years at least or so. But
Have
that's
you
where
do
I
you
would.
listen to
Yeah,
podcasts?
I do.
Have you ever listened to the podcast, what is it called? A Well-Designed Business? I think the person is Luann Nagara or something like that that runs it.
I have not, but it
So one of
sounds
the
good.
things that it's by designers for designers, and one of the things that she talks about that actually might help you with that is um having multiple accounts. And I don't know exactly the mechanisms that they use because they have of course there's a course that you can watch, and they
Right.
go through everything, but how they take all these different bank accounts and they're all for very, very specific things. So when money comes
Yeah.
in, they're for purchasing materials. And then as soon as X amount of dollars comes in, it automatically gets dispersed into those different accounts,
Right.
like
And
for
so that
payables
is,
and things like that.
yeah, that is what Sean Van Dyke, he has rewritten a book, Profit First, for
Hmm.
contractors. I would highly recommend that book for anyone in the trades, and it doesn't really apply in the trades, but Mike McCallowitz actually wrote that first book, Profit First, and it's for
Hmm.
all business, and it's that whole premise. And actually,
Hmm.
that's what I started doing, and that changed my business hugely. Um, so it took a while to get it dialed in, and I'm still working on percentages. It's been almost 3 years now. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that changed mine. I have all that. I have all those different accounts, and anytime any
Hmm.
revenue comes in, doesn't matter what it is, it gets split up in by percentage to different things.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just pissing in the wind over here. Then I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
No, I I
um,
I would say that book right there, Profit First for Contractors, is pretty much a must listen. I mean, you have. I
mhm.
mean, I would tell people
Well,
everyone.
okay. So, like along that vein, are there any other like like books or maybe podcast episodes specifically, or videos or anything like that that like really helped you? That's kind of in along that same vein.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've listened. Well, I guess audio books. I've listened to probably most of Mike McCallowitz's. So after I found out he's the one who wrote Profit First, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
for contractors, but for our businesses. I listened to that book, and then a
Mm-hmm.
few of his other ones. Another good one was Pumpkin Plan, and by him, and it's a short book, but basically it's about taking what works best in your business and focusing on that. So, like your
Mm-hmm.
best type of so everybody talks about what's your ideal client, what's your ideal customer.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on that, and basically that's the whole premise of that book.
I don't think most people
Pumpkin
actually do that.
farmers. No, I don't think so, and it's a tough one.
Mm.
It's
Oh
hard.
yeah.
So you can't, it's hard to be like, oh, I'm just going to cut off all my bad clients or my unideal clients. Well, in business, you have to have revenue. So you can't just cut them off. But the
Mhm.
idea is to just focus on your best ones, and put the
Mhm.
most of your energy to those best ones. And eventually the other ones will go away, because you're not, focusing on them. Or just the things that work the best in your business. And that's still a struggle. And we're trying to do that here. What actually,
Mhm.
what do we do best in? Well, there's the two sides. There's what do you want to do? And then sometimes what you really want to do is just not working. And so you can try and figure out why it's not working and maybe get it to work better. Or sometimes you just have to stop and be like, you know what, it's just not the best. I know it's what I want to do, but we're running a business, and, some things are just not as profitable. And you have to make that
Mhm.
choice of whether you just want to do this because you really, really want to do it and you're not going to make as much money, or, maybe it's not the best. And we need to do something
Yeah,
else.
I was actually listening or watching a pod, or not a podcast. Well, it was a podcast, but on YouTube. It was an interview with Mike Rowe, and something that he talked about is people are less willing to move these days than previously. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this is viable for anyone, but like the third option really is like you could have that thing that like you're really really good at or that you want to do, and maybe there's just another location that's more suited for that thing. If you're willing to move, that could potentially be an option too. But
Right.
again, I don't have any data to support that. I just know that that was really a thing back in the day where people would move to
Right.
where the work is. uh,
Oh, yeah.
so it'd be
Oh, you think
interesting
of
to
all the
see.
people who, came up to, the Northwest and Alaska for the gold rush,
Hmm.
although
Oh
it's
yeah.
just crazy to think, and we were up at a mine, Kennecott mine up in McGrath. It's a big copper mine, old copper mine. And the stories from there were just crazy. People were coming up, and that, people would die or they would get sick
Hmm.
or hurt and they would have to leave. But there was never a lack of people just waiting, of guys
Hmm.
waiting. And they would leave their families for a year or two, and just to go make a little bit of money. And to them it was a lot of money, but it was highly dangerous. And
Oh yeah.
you just don't see that now too much. We're pretty safe.
now, now you can go from coast to coast in like 2 days in your nice
Yeah.
air conditioner car, and people are just like,
Yeah.
nah, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah, it's
know.
a different world,
Yeah.
man.
Yep. Yep.
So,
But I wouldn't say it's not better. Yeah.
oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of the a bit of the dichotomy, right? Is like things have gotten better. But the question is, are some of the things that we gave up along the way, were they worth it? Like, because it's generally accepted that people aren't as tough as they used to be. So like, there's
Oh yeah.
people are really squishy these days,
Oh yeah.
in more ways
Yeah.
than one.
Yeah.
But um,
Well, life is so easy. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because that's
Yeah.
similar to what you were talking about before. Is like you had that contracting business, and things were. Like, you never wanna say it and kinda downplay it, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like, I don't mean it in a condescending
Yeah.
way where it's like, "Oh, that was easy." Relatively speaking, it was safe, you knew it, it was comfortable, and, like, so to
Right.
make that decision to switch to something new, man, that's scary as hell. Uh,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, so here, I'd like, how did you cope with that fear? Like, because some people handle fear better than others. Was just like you kind of buried it, or did you have any like coping mechanisms to kind of push through that? Because like that's always interesting to me is like how do you handle adversity and fear in a really ambiguous situation,
um, I don't know. I have to probably
or
ask
was
my
it too
wife.
long
She
ago?
might know better. Yeah. I don't know. I probably don't usually show stress too much, but
Hmm.
I feel like I'm a pretty chill person most of the time. But yeah, it was stressful, you know, but I think I just, you just keep doing it. Um, and and there was times I didn't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually probably maybe, yeah, 3 years ago, maybe, I actually applied for a different job at like a school district in the maintenance field because I was like, I don't want to be self-employed anymore. This is stupid.
Mm.
Um, but I went to an interview and then just was like, I just can't do this. For one, the pay was way less. You start thinking,
Yeah.
like being self-employed, it's hard. Sometimes you work so hard and you don't make any money. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when you really, really look at it, you're like, I'm really not making any money. Um, and a lot of that is just financial, mismanagement. You're treating your
Yeah.
business as a slush fund instead of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, but still, we just don't pay ourselves what we should. We don't charge what we should. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that along that line, that was a lot of that frustration because I've been working so hard, but just didn't feel like I was making any money. And like, man, I could go to work for somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. And
Yeah.
but it was tough. And so anyway, I didn't get the job, and I think I was so thankful. But I think in the interview, I was super honest. They kept asking me, "Why in the world do you want to come work for us? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have this business and you
I
do this,
don't.
and yeah." And I think I probably said I don't, but yeah, that was kind of I laugh when I think about that now. I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I actually did that. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, you just get tired and now I
Yeah.
can't imagine ever, doing anything else. I just
Yeah. Getting over that hump's the hard part, though. Like,
yeah,
you have that, like, if you were to look at it as like points in time, you have like the moment you make the decision to go after the thing, and then you have that ups and the downs. And you're like, fuck, what kind of decision did I make? And then you get to the high, and you're
yeah,
like, oh, this is amazing. A couple weeks
yeah,
later, like, what have I done?
yeah.
It's just
Oh yeah,
that roller coaster. Um,
yeah.
so what are the things that you focus on? Like, do you pretty much stay mainly with just concrete, or you do steel work yourself, right?
Yeah, we do some steel work, but mainly I say I probably focus steel on, any type of, brackets or hardware that we
Mm-hmm.
need
Yeah.
for hanging big sinks or, island supports. And then I do like table bases for the tables that we make.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't really try and get any other steel work. I've had quite a few requests for, hey, can you just do this steel thing? And I usually say no, unless it's
Mm-hmm.
wrapped in with another project. Now, if we're doing a bunch of other concrete work or whatever for them, and they want me to
Mm-hmm.
tack on, some other little steel thing for something, then I might would do that. But I really like to try and keep it focused. Otherwise, I just get so distracted. Um,
Oh yeah.
and my shop it's pretty big, but it's mainly it's set up as a concrete fabrication. So I mean, we pour
Okay.
concrete. It's set up for that,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a small area. I say small. It's about 20 by 14. That's kind of my metal working area. That I have a bandsaw, welders, and stuff, metal table set up, and but it's just not big enough to really take on any like really big metal projects. And we always have something being poured too. Um, so, I can't really break away too much and just focus like 2 weeks on some big metal thing. But
Yeah. Like that monster door that Cody Carpenter made with all the
yeah,
circle
the
cutouts. It's
circles.
like,
Yeah.
oh my
Now, if something like that came across my plate, I might would have to say yes. But
god.
I don't know. It would
I
have to
don't
be
know.
pretty
Talk to Cody
cool.
first. He
Yeah.
might talk you out of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh.
But
So it's more, you don't do more with the steel because of space, or because you fear it might take you away from the concrete? Because those are two different
uh,
things.
well, I'd say yeah, it's because of focus. I tell people,
Mm-hmm.
like, I have wood slabs here too, quite a few wood slabs. And people will come in my shop and like, oh, wow, you do wood. What do you do with these slabs? And I'm like, well, we integrate them in with our concrete projects. I
Mm-hmm.
don't just want to get into making wood projects for people because of the focus. We will integrate wood and concrete together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just really want to, we're marking ourselves as a fabrication company with concrete being the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't mean that there's not wood and steel here and there, but I don't know, it's just a focus thing because you can just get so distracted. And then I'm making
Mm-hmm.
cabinets for people, and I'm like, I don't want to be a cabinet maker. We're not set
Oh
up to
yeah.
be a cabinet shop. We're not efficient to be a cabinet shop. Our main efficiency is concrete fabrication. And so when I add wood or steel into a project, I have to charge accordingly because I know we're not going to be as fast as a metal shop, and we're not going
Yeah.
to be fast as a cabinet shop.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not efficient. And my guys that help me, or I have one employee, he's not a big woodworker. He can weld pretty well and fabricate, so he does some of that. But you know, our focus is concrete fabrication, so it that's what we're best at.
So if somebody was deciding whether to take on, like, let's say that they wanted to add steel to the type of things that they would do, is there anything that you would, like, any thought processes that they should use to decide whether they either should do that or should avoid it? Because, like, I have no intention of ever making anything out of steel. Like, not alone, one, steel doesn't appeal to me as a designer, and two, I'm already doing stuff with wood and soon to do stuff with glass. So, like, that focus that you were talking
Yeah,
about, like, you can only do so many things. Um, but let's say that they did want to do, like, I'd like to do
right.
steel. Like, how do you bring that into the fold and not let it take over? I guess would be a good way to put it. You know?
I think it's just discipline. You just have to really focus on what you're trying to do because it's easy to get distracted because you'll do steel stuff. People are like, oh wow, you work steel. Can you build this for me? Well, no,
Mhm.
I can't. That's not what I do. Here's another steel guy. That's what he does for a living. And so I have
So
a
you
few
refer somebody
friends.
out.
Oh yeah, I do. And I have, like we do a lot of concrete, like floating treads, or not necessarily floating, but
Yeah.
concrete treads, and they have steel stringers. Well, we never do any of the stringer work
Mhm.
because I'm not set up to do that heavy duty fabrication. And there's other
Right.
guys who do it way better, way faster.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, that's the kind of stuff we say no to. We're like, no, we make the treads, but usually just our table bases and any I like being able to fabricate my own brackets and support hardware and things like that because I can make it how I want to make it instead of trying to.
Yeah.
Otherwise I would have to sketch it up for somebody, and hope they
Mhm.
understood what we're trying to do, and I can't get it out on my timeline. I have to wait for their schedule, and a lot of it that's
Mhm.
more of a scheduling thing because we
Yeah.
can whip up a bracket in an hour versus having to call up somebody and say, hey, can you build this for me? What's it going to
That's a good
cost?
part.
How's it long? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that we do that more for efficiency's sake. Um,
Yeah.
as far
Yeah,
as our
'cause I've run into that
brackets and
problem
that,
too.
right. And so
Yeah.
that's why I like having that. And I like metal fabricate. I like doing stuff up. So I also like it. So, but I have to focus.
Yeah. Is that the same reason that you do the table bases too, for the efficiency, and you can kinda do it how you want? Like, why don't you outsource that part of it like you do with like the stringers, for example?
Probably because I like to do it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and that's kind of a fabrication side of it because especially now, if I was just doing like regular, those modern square tube bases, I did one a while back, about 6 months ago, I think. Um, and I think if I did more of those, people just want those basic type thing, like X legs. I probably
Mhm.
would sub those out from now on. Um, because I mean, you start looking online and you can buy those things for so cheap. And I
Oh,
start
yeah.
thinking, oh man, the time that it took me to make them in my shop, you know what I mean? It's just not.
Mhm.
But like custom bases, things that would be, I don't know. That's a hard one because I probably do more maybe, and now I have a real solid reason, just because I want to. I think that's a lot that comes down to it is if I want to or if I don't. I try and
Mhm.
have that focus and say no, but sometimes I just want to do it. That's why I also do some projects that I probably should have said no
Uh-huh.
to from a business standpoint because it didn't make me any money or I wasn't able to charge enough. but I wanted to do it, so I
Yeah,
just
but
did
some
it.
of those projects
Um,
can end up being like portfolio pieces where like you don't make as much as you probably should
right.
have made on it, but if you can get a picture of it, that
Yeah.
picture easily takes up
Right.
the gap between probably what you should have made and what you ended up making. Because then
And
the next person that comes
that's
along, you
true.
can show them a picture,
Yeah.
right? And then
Right.
they're like,
And that's
"Oh, I
true.
want that."
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And I think I always tell people, they're like, "Oh man, if you can't charge enough to make it, well then you don't do it." And sometimes you have to
Fuck
make that
that.
decision. Yeah. Sometimes and I think it's all in different points of your business too.
Mhm.
If you've been in business and you're where you at and want to be, and you've been in for 15 years, well then maybe at that point you say no. We're not doing anything unless it meets this criteria and this bottom line, and we can make this
Mhm.
profit percentage. Well then, yeah. Um, but sometimes cool stuff comes along, and you know you just want to make it. But I think that comes from just keeping things interesting in the business, and
Mhm.
and you try and get what you need out of it. But sometimes, yeah, there's been lots of things I've done that, looking back, I'm like, man, I didn't make any money, but it was still cool. And I got good,
Mhm.
and like you said, you get good pictures. And then
Mhm.
the next time somebody comes along, and they're like, oh, hey, can you do that again or something like it? How much? And then you're like, oh, well, this is what I should have made. And you give them that
Mhm.
price because you don't need to make it again. But if they
Mhm.
paid for what you really need to make, well, then yeah, sure, you'll do it. But you kind of got that out of your headspace, and that was done. Check that off the list. I
Mhm.
made it, and
Yeah, that was something that Martin Haddock and I have talked about many times. Like he'll do a picture of it and like I didn't make near as much as I should have made on it. He's like, but I got a banging ass picture of it now, and arguably just as important, he's like, I know what I would charge for it now,
right.
because like,
And that's
how are you
super
supposed to?
important. Yeah.
Uh huh.
Yeah. Because you
Like,
don't
how are you
know,
supposed to know how
if you,
much something you should charge for it before you've done it? Like to say like this incredibly
yeah,
complex piece with this mold, and then you have all the
yeah,
processing and then the sealing time. Like
yeah,
to expect that you're going to be able to nail it right on the money with how much it would take you the first go around is almost naive
yeah,
or uh arrogant even, like
yeah.
because some of the things you just don't even know like what's going to go
You
into
don't know.
this.
And that's the hardest part, I think, with like custom projects,
Mm-hmm.
is you just have to estimate, and you're always wrong in your estimation. And it's funny, we always know we're always going to be wrong, but we still tell ourselves that, oh yeah, it will only take a week. We can do this in a week. We
Mm-hmm.
hammer it down, X amount of hours, it'll take this, we could do that, we could do that. And it's funny because we always know that we rarely ever meet that.
Mm-hmm.
But every time we do it again, we still tell ourselves that, oh, no, no, it'll only take this long. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have a big project that we bid a while back, and we got it. And it was pretty risky. And, but yeah, I did that and figured out what I need. And then, you know, you just add to it. And because there's so many unknowns, and sometimes you feel kind of bad maybe, but you can't feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's just the cost. And I think a lot of that is just knowing your numbers. Everybody talks about knowing your numbers in your business, but just really knowing like what you actually have to make to break even, overhead, employees, your salary, all of that. And if you know that number, what you have to sell, what you have to make, per hour, per day, then you don't feel bad, because sometimes you'll be like, man, that's a lot of money. How can it be that much money? But then when you do the math, you're like, well, that's what I have to, that's what it costs. So it just is what it is. And then it just takes that. And that's what's helped me a lot, is once I figured all that out, there's no more emotion tied to it. It's no, that's the number that we have to sell in order to actually, make this business worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you don't feel bad. You're just, it is what it is. And so if you can't meet that number, well, then you just don't do it. Or you just make the decision to take a loss because, you'll get a great picture, or it's a marketing thing. You just chalk it up
Mm-hmm.
with marketing costs or whatever. And sometimes you make that decision. You have to, because we've had cool projects come along, but I just couldn't quite sell them for what they probably need to be sold for. But then you just chalk it up as marketing costs. But you can't
Mm-hmm.
do that every single time, or else you'll be in the hole.
Yeah.
You can't. But like we said, sometimes there's those things that come along that you know.
Well, it, yeah, you make a good point about like it gets brought up in the forums a lot with like know your numbers, but it's rarely ever explained like how you actually come up with most of those numbers. Did that book that you mentioned earlier like really go into like how do you actually figure out what those numbers are? Because some people have overhead, some people don't. Some people have
Well,
uh
we all have overhead. So how I was taught to do it is that you take all your fixed costs, all your costs that are there if you're not producing work. So if you have shop rent, if you have a truck payment, if you have all your
mhm,
insurance, and as an owner, um, your salary should be in there, because you're getting paid, or you should be getting paid, whether or not you have work on in the shop for that week. You're getting paid, or you should be. It's a little tougher when you're sole and you don't have anybody else working for you. So you think
mhm,
you're the only one doing the work. So it always is a little tougher. But if you look at it that way, that you're going to determine to pay yourself X amount regardless. And so obviously you have to meet sales goals. But so they say try and stay on track. I always get all these rabbit trails. But
oh no,
um,
dude, you're good. This is like the best stuff.
yeah. Um, but yeah, your salary and then all the fixed costs that you have to pay for, whether or not you have work coming in. And that's your overhead, and that's going to be a certain number. Um, and you have to go back and really look. It's easy, like all the things that you can think of off the top of your head, but really like dig deep into your what actually the cost. Your insurance, you divide that by 12 months. And then how I did it, I went through and all those costs, what I want to pay, what I'm paying myself every month. um, and then all my other costs, insurance, if I have a truck payment, which I don't, all those different things, my shop rent, um,
Hmm.
all those. Oh, man, I probably have a spreadsheet here somewhere, but all those different things. And my phone bill for the business, my internet bill for my office, all those little costs, and I pay those every month, regardless if I sell work, because I'm not,
Hmm.
I don't get out of the lease of my shop if I don't sell work for the month. It's still there. I still have to pay that bill. Um, so all those different things, and then I divide that up by the working hours of the year. And I think a pretty common one is like 1,700 hours or something for the year, because there's actually, if you work 40 hours a week, it's actually what, like 1,900 or 2,000 hours. But actual real production hours, you're not
Oh, it's
being
way less than
productive.
that.
Right. And so I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people use 1,700.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just, and so you divide all those numbers by 1,700 and you come up with an hourly number. And that is your hourly, if it's 60 or $70 an hour that you need to be billing, and that just covers your overhead. And that should include your salary as the owner. And then you have, employee costs, what they cost an hour, and not just
Hmm.
what you pay them, but their actual, labor burden, actually what their insurance and social security, all that. And then you have to figure out, what you want to make, at the end of the year to make it all worth it, other than just getting paid.
Yeah.
And you break that down. So, like if you can, I don't know, you do this and you try and make a goal. You're like, at the end of the year, I want $50,000 in the bank for, just my trouble. Otherwise, I could go make this wage somewhere else, and not have the stress. So you divide that by the 1,700 and you put that all in a number, and that's your hourly rate. And so when you start figuring up, how long a job's going to take, you say it's going to take us 23 hours, and you figure up any materials it's going to cost. You add those materials times that hourly number, and that's the cost. And that is, that's your that has your profit built in and what you want to make, all that. And so then obviously you have to have, you have to know then, okay, how much do you have to sell a month
Mm-hmm.
in order to make that number, for the month, to make all those numbers work, what's that monthly number? And so then you have your kind of your break even, sales number. And that's if, you have to know, kind of what profit margin you're selling your work at, because if if you're selling at like a 50% profit margin, you have to sell, um, half of what you sell is going to go to your overhead. The other half is your costs. So let's say I have an employee, um, and so materials on a job is $1,000, and my labor for that employee is going to be, let's just say, another $1,000. So that's $2,000 is what it costs me to produce that job. And so to sell it 50%, you would double it, and that would be $4,000, and that would be the cost of that job. And it's just straightforward numbers, and there's no there's no, you don't have to think about
Mm-hmm.
it. And so then that other 50%, the 2,000, that's what pays for your overhead, and that's your profit. And so you use that other 50%, the other 2,000, to pay for all your overhead for that. But you may not be able to sell it 50%. You may be selling it 25% profit. So that 25% of the cost of that job, or the price of that job, is what's going to be paying for your overhead. So if you know that you're selling at 25%, well, then you have to make sure that. So then you have to do the math and say, okay, 25% of this number is what's paying for my overhead. How much do I have to sell to make 25% meet my overhead for the month? And so then you have a sales goal. And so it's been great for me when I know that break even number. It really helps me focus on my marketing and calling people back. And because otherwise, when you're just trying to sell as much as you can sell, that's so
Mm-hmm.
vague. There's no number. And so it's like, wow, I sold as much as I could sell, and it's only, but that doesn't really help you, because when you have to at least meet a certain number just to break even, pay yourself, pay your bills, pay your employee. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that, okay, well, by this time it's the third week in this month and I have not met that goal, I'm not going to pay my bills, or I'm going to be dipping in the savings in order to break even. It motivates you to call these people back and to okay, I need to follow up with this one. And it's great because a lot of times when you do, you're like, you end up closing another deal that you would have never closed, because you
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that you needed to. And you get really relaxed. And I used to be like, oh, well, people will call me or people will follow up with me if they want to do it. And doesn't mean that I'm like a pushy sales, doesn't mean that
Yeah.
I'm super pushy or anything, but it just motivates you to do what you need to do. Because that also is another thing that, being in business, especially making stuff like this, we like to focus on, all the stuff we have to make. But then you have to really realize that when you're in business, your main responsibility is sales and running the business. It's
Mm-hmm.
not making the stuff that you make, um, because if you're just going to make stuff, you just go work for somebody else and make it and get your fulfillment that way. But if you're going to, be in business, you have to focus on, selling and running the business, and the making stuff is secondary at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a little hard for depending on what avenue you come at being a business owner. Like if you come at it from like an artistic creative standpoint, I think
Right.
those people stereotypically have a lot harder time with grappling with that. Like if you can't sell your work,
Right.
it then you're up
Right.
shit creek, right? But then like the people who come at
Yeah.
it from like the contractors and those types of guys are like, no, you got to sell it. I mean, it is what it is. But
Yeah.
those guys usually have a little bit harder time with the creative side. So it's always interesting talking
Right.
with people
Yeah.
because I get
Well,
to see
it's that
both sides.
whole, right. And it's that, it's that starving artist mentality that, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to do whatever it is you want to do, regardless if you make money. And that's fine. Really, if that's what
Until
somebody
you
wants to
starve.
do. Yeah, yeah. But that's fine, if that's what you want to do. But I think you really have to just decide on what it is you really, really want to do. And if that's what's utmost important to you is being able to do exactly what you want to do every single day. I want to make this stuff. Then you have to make that choice. But then when you have a family and you have kids, you have to,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, what's your responsibility then? I can do all the things that just I want to do, but if it's not producing, and I'm not able to actually provide, well then, I'm kind of a pretty crappy person. Um,
Yeah, one of the things that I've found interesting with the stuff that I've listened to is, crap, who is it? Seth Godin, I think, is who talks about it. How it's much easier to find a market, or not find a market, but to sell to an existing market than it is to go create a brand new one. So it's not to say that you can't like go out and make the exact things that you want to make, and
right,
that's not possible. You just have to understand that that is an uphill battle, because then you
right,
actually have to legitimately go find the people who want that thing. And it's not to say that
right.
it's impossible. Just having the understanding that that's an uphill battle is probably like what you were talking about just a
Hmm.
second ago with like knowing your numbers. That gives you something to actually aim at. If you understand that it's going to be hard as hell to begin with, then when it takes you forever to sell something, you're just like, well, I mean, it's going to be hard. Like, this is to be expected.
Right.
Um, and I've always been curious, like how that actually works, that dynamic, right? Because most people, just by law of numbers, right? Like your average is your average, but they're too scared to do that because that's hard. That is so hard making
Yeah.
something. I'm not going to say that. That's going to get me in trouble with some other people. But when you're coming up with things that are the things that you want to make, finding the person to buy that.
Yeah.
Do you and do, are most of the things that you make people coming to you and asking for those things to be made, or do you sketch things out and make things that are like of your own
I would
imagination, if you
say,
will?
yeah, most of what I do probably has been requested, or somebody says, hey, we want a fire table for our back deck, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what they want. And I have one design that I did a few years ago, and I've sold a few of those. At this point, we're not really making things and then putting them for sale. That's kind of my goal for next year. I have some things like I have a few different fire tables and different things that I've made mold for, and a couple other projects that we're working on. And that's kind of my goal for next year is to actually make products that are like pre-made that we just make,
Mm-hmm.
and then sell. That's a whole nother,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much what we do. People come to us and they want things, and I will design things for people. But usually, no, it's usually not that. Hey, I make this thing totally like like a spec item, and then just try and sell it. I haven't done that in a while. I did that with that first fire table that I said that I designed. I did that, and I sold that, and then from there, I've sold quite a few of those same ones.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't like a super custom art piece.
Yeah.
Um, I did design a table a while back with some crazy angled legs, and then once I get on the internet, I find, oh wow, that's actually very similar stuff out there. But to me, it was like, oh well, I thought I just drew that up
Yeah.
in Fusion. But I did do that one, and I sketched that up, and I've had it for probably 3 years, and I finally was able to sell it to somebody that came to me looking for a table, and they just wanted something that was super unique, and so I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I did, and just. But they were coming to me for a dining room table and say, "Hey, I've got this drawing, something I sketched like 3 years ago. What do you think about this?" And they loved it. But I didn't actually make it, beforehand and try and pawn it off or sell it off.
Do you have a lot of people that come to you for like your design work? Like they say, "Hey, we want a table. Can you design us a table?" Like, so not necessarily I've designed this thing, I made this thing, and then I try and sell this thing, but I have a portfolio of work and I have a relationship with like a designer, for example, and
Right.
they're coming to you for your design prowess. Do you have many jobs that come in
We
like that or not really?
we have I'd say that we have a few every year. Like we'll be like,
Mhm.
hey, we have this fire. I think probably fireplaces has been probably um, more recently. But hey, we have
Mhm.
this big fireplace. We've seen some of your stuff. What do you think? And
Mhm.
so at that point, you have to really get into, well, what do you like? And so you just have to ask a lot of questions,
Mhm.
of people, because I can draw up something and be like, that looks really stupid. So you really have to, that's just part of selling. You just have to ask more questions than you try to answer. But um, you try and get the, what kind of stuff they like. Have you seen stuff out there that you don't like, or what have we done that you kind of like, and so it will go from there, I guess. But that's kind of that design process, you know.
Mhm.
But
Have
as
you
far
avoided
as
that?
as far
Or
as
like why haven't you done more of that?
I don't know if I've avoided it, but I guess sometimes I guess it may be 50-50, or maybe not quite 50% of people that come to me and want me to help them design things. I'd say
Mhm.
probably more like 75% already kind of have a pretty good idea what they want.
Yeah.
And usually that is because they've looked over the stuff that we've done. Um, or they've seen, my pictures online and things like that. So hey, you did a fireplace like this. We want something very similar. Now, a lot of times they don't want it exactly the same.
Mhm.
They'll change, they want to change things up. And so that's where we can suggest different things. And hey, I think I want to try this, or I really think it would look better like this, or I did that one and I don't tell them that I didn't really like it, but I'll be like, oh, I didn't really like how that one. Let's do something like this. So first thing you try
That
and be
looked
like,
dumb.
uh, right, and so then you're just like, oh no, I really want to try this, and really because I just don't want to do that other one again.
Mhm.
But yeah, but as
Hmm.
far as I wouldn't say that I'm like such an original designer that people are like seeking me out at this point to like really. I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe that's being too. I don't know what's the word. Yeah.
It's like, "To what?" Yeah, I mean, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just I was mainly just curious as to, like, why your, business or the things that you made were delineated in that way, right? So, li uh, like, some people, they don't wanna deal with it, right? So, like, the more custom you
Right.
get, the more time you have to sink into it. There's just no way around it.
Right. So in for from a lot of times, man, from a business standpoint, it is a lot harder to make money on custom stuff. It just
Mhm,
really is, because it takes more time than you thought it would take. So you never charge enough. I mean, every time you get done with a custom project, you're just like, oh, I didn't charge enough. I mean, it happens
mhm,
every single time. And so, from a straight business standpoint, if you have to be honest with yourself, it's not an awesome, super profitable business move to constantly do super custom stuff. You always look back and you're like, how many super easy, we'll just say kitchens, like
yeah.
basic concrete countertops can I make with, without even thinking about it. And you
Well,
start
here,
doing that math. Yeah,
let me be devil's advocate on that for
yeah,
just a sec. Like you've been running a business of some kind for quite a while, right?
mhm,
So we know that there are, I mean, I don't guess we don't know how many, but like we'll say hundreds or thousands of full custom shops all around the world that make it
right,
work. Theoretically, like we don't know what their book looks like, so it's hard to say for
right,
sure, but you know that it's possible. So what I can't think of the like I can't think of the best way to phrase it. So like there has to be a way to make it work. So why do most people not make it work?
So
Knowing what you know. Is it a
I
fear
mean,
thing?
so yeah, I mean, that it probably is just more like head trash stuff.
Mhm.
We just tell ourselves that, oh, there's no way we can charge that much, or there's no way anyone would
Mhm.
pay that much. Um, and of course, that I'm just realizing what I said was probably kind of contradictory, but it is. It's and that's when you ask that, why not? It probably is just kind of head trash stuff. We just tell ourselves it won't work. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I think we probably all struggle with that, and I struggle with that a lot. Whenever you're like,
Mhm.
oh, no one's going to pay that much, no one is going to pay that much, but the problem is there are people out there that will, and they don't even
Mhm.
think about it. We had a project this last year that I how much I want to expand where people watch this, but the right person watches it. But but we figured out what we needed to make on it, and then we added a lot, and I was like, "There's no way," and the only response I got was, how do you prefer payment, check, card, or
Mhm.
cash?" And that's the only response I got, and it kind of blew me away. And so then I think we get in our own heads a lot of that, we can't make it work, or no one's going to pay that. No one's going to, but then people do, because, obviously you have to find those people, and
Yeah.
90% of people won't pay that much. Um, but I think it's a mindset thing though, too, that, we have to stop thinking about money how we think about money, um, and cost and value. Um, because other people value things a lot differently, and money is not an object where it may be for us. I know it is for me.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
I'm not at that point to where I don't think about it any. um, so yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably a
cuz
little
like
contradictory, but yeah.
yeah. Well, because like it's one of those things where like you can find examples of where that's not the case. And so that means that it's possible, and finding those people to talk to, or they may not even be open to like offering the things that they've found, which is a very real possibility. Um
Right.
but like maybe a little bit of context here. So like my wife and I are finally on the same page. It's like you're in the same book, but you're in completely different chapters. And it took us a while to get to where we were even reading the same book.
Right.
um, so we're at the point now where we're switching to a primarily focused on the digital side of things. So the podcast, for example.
Hmm.
One of the other things that we're heavily focusing on is a YouTube channel, which means I get to design and make whatever the fuck I want. So I'm literally being like set free onto the world, if you if you will.
Yeah.
And we're gonna try and approach it from that side of things where it it doesn't matter if the piece sells, which is a huge load off, right? Because
Because the piece
what
is the
you're
content. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
because that was always one of the hard things for me is like I would come up with these crazy things, and Martin would look at me like I've got like three heads or something. And we're just always like, I just don't know who would buy it. But when you
Yeah.
remove that from it, it doesn't really matter, because if you
Yeah.
get this is I'm not saying that we would ever get this, but if you have a just one video up on YouTube that gets 1,000,000 views,
Right.
that's 1,000,000 people that just saw your thing. And
Right.
who did they tell? And then who did they tell? And
And now
then you
you'll
get to
finally find somebody who will buy that thing.
right. So that's
Yeah.
kind of
Right.
I don't know if it'll work. It may be an epic
Yeah.
failure. No idea.
Yeah.
But like
Right.
I'm trying to find those ways to figure out like how do you make it work? Like how do because concrete, the things that we can make with concrete is just it's so beautiful and so amazing that Like, because I really like, there's not a lot of people in our industry that do some of the more rustic things like you do, like with you do Dusty Crete, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
You're kind of quiet about
Yeah.
that. Own it. Own
No,
it.
no, 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 I do. Yeah. That's probably,
uh,
I would say 90% of what our finishes are is that dusty Crete stone finish. Yep.
which is rare in our industry, which is kind of weird because it's so
Yeah.
beautiful and unique.
Yeah.
Is that do you do those more unique things because it's something that you push and enjoy doing, or is it just because Alaska is a completely different animal, right? Is it more
Right.
because of your market or marketing?
I think, I don't know. I do it because I like it. I know when I first
Mhm.
saw it, I was like, that is super cool. I
Mhm.
would say though, we bounce back. It kind of comes and goes. Like we'll do a lot of that, and then we go. Then we have times where, like, 1 month we'll do nothing but super, like, more clean and modern finishes. And so
Mhm.
there's a big modern push up here in Alaska. A lot of the builders I work for build pretty modern homes, and so um, in those we maybe do a little bit less, or we clean that finish up where we, kind of have it a blend of that
Mhm.
textured finish, but a little cleaner,
So like color
version
on
of it.
color.
Yeah, you can see behind me here, some of those different ones, but just cleaner
Mhm.
versions of those. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a blend, and yeah, it's probably Alaska. There's a big rustic part of Alaska. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, we do a lot of that, and probably a lot in our fireplace or stove hearths and things. We keep those a lot more rustic and textured and hand carved edges. But when it
Mhm.
comes to like other things, we maybe go a little cleaner. It's all depends on the designers who are designing these houses and the spaces, and
Mhm.
some of them really like the rusted side, some of them like the more modern side. So I'd say Alaska, especially Anchorage. Anyway, I'm from the Anchorage area, the largest. It's probably split, so we see both sides.
With some of the designers that you work with, what are some of like the best tactics that you found that worked really well with both finding and and like building that relationship? Were there any things that worked just really well for you?
Oh man, I think most of them have found me. So I'm really, really bad about reaching out. And
Mhm.
I keep saying for probably the last 3 years that I'm going to, draft some sort of form letter or whatever, and like really reach out to all these builders and all these designers and architects in the area and really go after and, form relationships. And I have not done that at all. Yeah, I just keep putting it. I just
And I
keep
dropped the
putting it
ball.
off, and well, I keep, just, yeah, not doing it. They usually find me from whatever. We did a parade of homes. We've done a lot of parade of homes. We've had a couple of things and houses that have been in the parade of homes the last couple of years, and that's been probably something that's gotten us some, exposure, I would say. Um, I was just honored to do some work for some really high end builders, so that really helps, with credibility. Um,
Mhm.
I give them a lot of credit for that.
So you're a bit of an
That's
anomaly in
helped.
our industry. It's usually the complete opposite, right? Like somebody's got to do like the cold calling or whatever tactic they decide to use.
Right.
Okay, well, so like, what are some of the main things that you're doing where like people just find you? Because that's really rare.
I would just say, I guess, social media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, and then just, I, so I guess another thing that's probably very different for me is I don't have a lot of competition up here. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
pretty niche market, and there's really no one else doing it. There's another guy that's about 45 minutes from me. We work in the same area because you're around here. I work, an hour each direction from my house. It's kind of this main area, and there's really nowhere else. I was pretty concentrated versus guys that live in the lower 48. what we call the rest of the United States. You guys can cross state lines. We're
Yeah.
not crossing state lines here. I'm not going into Canada and doing work. Um, it's
That might be a little
Canada,
tough right now anyway, so
right? Well, that's the border's like 9 hours away, so it's obviously it's just this place is so big, but yeah. So I guess I have that advantage that there's really
hmm
not a lot of people doing this. There's a few guys that do it here and there, um, but not full time,
yeah.
and not as a real job. Um, there's some flat
So,
work guys that do that, experiment
ooh,
here and there, but yeah,
yeah, that's always interesting seeing how that turns out. Either it turns out pretty good because they have experience with the material, or just like, dude, you
yeah.
just take that out.
It's a Yeah. Well, it's a different, just a different,
Monster.
yeah, it's a different monster. It's a whole different way to use concrete, and it's not the same. So you have to apply a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
different. We know that we have to apply way different principles than doing a
Oh,
floor.
Caleb and I were talking about that when we talked, and just like I would never ever like be like, if somebody came to me like, can you do like a patio? I'd be like, "Pfft, I have no idea where to even start with that. Will you do concrete? But like,
Yeah,
I have no idea where I would even
yeah.
start with that. Um,
So coming from that, general contractor background, when I worked for my dad, we did everything from the ground up, foundations to
mhm.
roofs. And so I did a lot of concrete slabs and foundations and stuff like that, growing up. And that was one of my hard no's when I started my own thing. That was not gonna, I was not gonna even think about getting into that, because I still get requests. Now I've been 4.5 years now that focused on the concrete side of things. I changed my business name to CreteWRX, and I just have to say no. I get so many requests even still now. Hey, can you polish this floor? Can you do this? I'm like,
Ooh,
no, we don't do floors. We don't do that stuff because and I can hire a couple guys that are really good behind a floor polisher and no staining, and I could run that side of my business, and I could probably make pretty good money because there's not a lot of people up here who do it. There are a
mhm.
few, but there's such a high demand that as far as a business opportunity, I'm like, oh man, I could probably really do that. And I have a lot of contacts with builders that are always asking me to do it. But it comes back to that focus thing. I'm like, yeah, sure, I could start another wing of my company and do that,
Mhm.
but then it would just stretch me, and I wouldn't be able to. And I don't feel like I'm where I want to be now with this side of things. That why in the world would I want to distract myself with a whole nother wing of
Yeah, you'd almost have to
offerings?
elevate yourself to like CEO status and then have somebody run both companies and then you manage that, or one person for each business and then
Right,
you manage them. Yeah, I don't know
right,
that a lot of people that like are kind of drawn to what we do. I don't know that that is of interest to them, which is probably what makes it so difficult for us, right?
right.
Um
I struggle
like
with
how do
that
you
because at some point I'd be like, it would be nice to retire, like actually
yeah,
retire. But I don't know. I'm kind of my personality. I think I'll probably work until I die.
yeah.
Um, I don't see myself not making things and not, obviously I'll get to a point where I can't be, muscling around big heavy stuff all the time, but that's where you
We
have
got
people to
machines and
do it
tools
for
for
you.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's like in my shop here, we do so much. We've got a forklift here. So we never usually have to lift anything heavy until we get to the job site. And then we're like, oh crap,
Mhm.
I forgot how heavy this was.
I
We're
have
like,
made
oh
a
no.
bad decision somewhere.
Yes, yes. We did that the other day. We had these big old pieces, and we got there and we're like, oh no, we actually didn't realize how heavy they were because we never actually picked them up. Um,
Mhm.
so, but
Do
almost
you
shot
have a
us in the
King's
foot.
cart or anything like that?
I have one that I made. I made my about 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I copied Josh Thiel's old design and kind of made one of my own. Um,
Did you
but
paint it neon pink like Simon?
I have not painted. It's still rusty metal. because I need to make some changes, and so I never did do anything with it
Mm-hmm.
because I was gonna make changes, and so it's just that. But I actually we have a big job coming up, and I actually have this is a metal work that I subbed out. I'll be proud of myself. So the I needed to make a new subframe for it because right now I have like a 9 foot subframe, the part that sits in the middle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's worked for most things. But this, I have an 18-foot island to do, um, and so I needed
Because
like a
why
20
not?
foot. Yeah, because why not? Um, and so I have to have a 20-foot subframe, and so I was like, you know what, we need to redesign this. We'll make a couple 10
Mm-hmm.
footers, and I could weld it up in my shop. But I have a friend, and so I sent him a drawing. Said, "Hey, can you make this for me?" And it's such a huge relief. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually proud of myself for that one. I actually gave something away. Um, but
I think that is the thing that I do the most often is underestimating the ancillary parts of a project. So it's not like the direct time of like what it takes to actually like make the piece, but you forget like how long does it take me to set the area up to do it? How long does it take me to
right,
go grab supplies? How long does it take me to vacuum up the floor? How long does it
right,
take me to clean up after I've done it? Like those are the things that just really just work me over. And
right.
man, getting a hold
So
of those,
one
that's
thing that I've
rough.
started, one thing that I've started doing this last year is like job costing, and it sounds funny that it's kind of embarrassing maybe to be in business so long and have never really job costed. Um, but like after every job is done, every project is like sit down like that next day and go through how long did it take us to make that? How long, what the materials we use. And for concrete fabrication, I feel like it's pretty easy because I've got it down now to where I pretty much know a per square foot cost. Um,
Hmm.
I know my mix designs, and if a job was 50 square foot, I know that this is what it costs me per square foot in materials. That if we make it twice, obviously it's double. Um, but around $12 a square foot or whatever. And that's usually with some melamine and all that forming materials. I just kind of deduce that all down to a square foot price, and that's what I
Hmm.
know it costs me. Um, and so where was I going with this? But yeah, job costs. So I just figure out. I know I lost track.
Off he goes.
But just yeah, yeah. So just figuring out, what it cost you, how long it took you to do it. If I actually worked on the project, because I've got a great guy, Michael. Now he does so much here, and there's quite a few projects that I never touch. I mean, I seal them up or whatever. I do finishing touches. I still don't give up that control. I usually pretty much all my projects, I'm doing the last finishing touches, sealing them up, doing any little things, and
Mm.
getting them out the door. Um, so I figure out how much time it took us, and did we actually make money on it, or what it was, um, and that gives you a good idea of it really lets you know if you're actually making money, like those little things, like how long it took us to clean up the shop. And I can't really break that down per job necessarily because we usually have like
Hmm.
3 different things going on at once. So cleaning up the shop is not can't be really tied to one job. It's just kind of an always every day, it's a wreck. um, so it's
As
and
bad as
I won't
Brent,
I won't
or are we talking?
I won't I won't pan my out this window here and let you see all that. But yeah, I think that's super important to get in the habit of doing, of really breaking down, because it really, and that's part of knowing your numbers, because if you don't know that stuff, you don't know if you're actually making money. And then you might find
D-
out that, man, all those extra things that we're doing, I didn't charge for those at all. And then you start, and that's
mhm,
kind of maybe part of your overhead, or, whatever, um,
mhm.
that extra. Then now you're like, okay, from now on, I have to start adding on, figure out what it's going to take me. And I add on 3 more hours because it's always taken me 3 hours, or. So,
Yeah.
but you don't know that unless you kind of track it and you
Yeah. What is the saying? Like you can't manage it if you don't track it or something, something along those lines.
yeah,
Do you have like clipboards and all that follow the projects around the shop? Like how do you keep track of those? Because I am one of the quotes that I am the biggest believer in is the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind. You will not remember. You will not take the time to do it.
right.
Unless you write it down and focus on it. Like, are you pulling this?
Yeah.
This might kind of come as a bit of a levying an attack of sorts, but like, are you um pulling that information from memory, or do you have like some tracking mechanism that you use to kind of follow those projects around? Does that make sense?
Um, Maybe a little bit of both, and that's so I have a spreadsheet of jobs that we've sold for the month or whatever.
Hmm.
I have job in all my invoices of jobs we have to get done. Um, And so I keep track of that. And then I have it in my calendar. I try and go through, I actually have a few that I have to do today, um, and schedule them out on our calendar, on our fabrication calendar. What we're going to start fabricating this week, the jobs, and this is the date that it needs to be installed. And, we got to start this job here, so we have a schedule. Um, my guy Michael doesn't probably always see that as much as he should. We used to have like a whiteboard that we had drawn by bottom
Hmm.
that I had the job list on there. We redesigned our shop a couple months ago, put a bunch of new shelving, so that got taken down. So we actually gonna put it back up on another part of the wall, because that was super helpful. Because if you're going off by memory, you forget,
Oh
because
yeah.
we have a list right now of, I think it's like 28 projects in our
Hmm.
queue, and so there's no way you can remember that and keep track of. Oh, next week I got to start X job. I'll drop the ball, and so yeah, we have to have those written down in a list of jobs to complete. And as far as the jobs go, right now, if I have drawings, I print out drawings, and I have the batch sheets for that, the concrete batch sheets.
Hmm.
And those are all labeled per job name. So we have a batch sheet, and then any drawings or there's templates or drawings, um, that are in those. So that's how we kind of keep track of that. It's probably not the best, but the batch sheet
It's better than
usually
nothing.
yeah, when Michael batches, he has the batch sheet, and as he batches, he checks off each thing that he batched out, so we try not to forget anything. That's happened, but it's pretty rare though.
Hmm.
um, he's pretty good, and with that batch sheet, and if you're getting a habit of checking off each item as you weigh it out, you don't forget. There's no and if something's not checked off, you're like, hey, why is that not checked off? you know um,
Uh-oh, did I put that in there?
yeah, and some things you can kind of look in and you're like, oh yeah, I see it. But that's a human error, so that's where maybe a bag mix gets really easy that way. um,
Hmm.
but I feel we're pretty
Yeah, that's
efficient
one of
with
the
our
main
batch.
selling points,
Yeah,
right?
right. So
Do you still use Jeff's calculator, or do you have one of your own?
I actually use a calculator from Trinic that I've used since I started.
Hmm.
Their whole batch sheet, and I've modified it. So I've gone in and modified it some, and but that's the one I use. That's the one I started with, and I like it.
Yeah.
It makes them. I cannot get into the way of doing things with like quarter batches and half batches. I don't do that. We put in the square foot of the project, and it
Hmm.
spits out per quarter pound, per tenth of a pound, and we'll just round up if we need to. But I like
Hmm.
having it that way. That way you can you can get it down to the ounce. I'm not doing a half batch, and that's where I think sometimes I struggled with if I tried bag mixes. It was, oh man, it's off of 50 pounds, and it
Yeah.
was really hard because you can't just put in square footage, and it gets harder to batch effectively for me. Um, I guess there's spreadsheets out for that, but I just like the raw ingredient batching.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I'm used to, and it's what we're good at. And we usually batch things directly into our Imer 360, so we don't have a million buckets lying around. We just batch everything straight into there. And
Yeah, that I think. Who was I talking with? I think it was. Who was I talking to that was about that? Like sometimes, it was Brent. Um, even though some things come along that may be better, they have to be a certain level better, right? In order for you to switch, because like you everything has a learning curve to it, and
right,
you never want to underestimate that learning curve, right? Because like you'll spend a lot of time just getting up to speed with like a new thing, like a new sealer comes out. Well, you have the learning curve that's associated with it, and is that time uh, better spent on other things than just sticking with what you already know and you're very efficient at? And that's a really difficult thing to kind of figure out or gauge. Maybe are there any
well, that's what you
uh,
have to figure out. You have to decide on, if are the gains worth it? Because
yeah.
if it is that much better, well, then it is worth the learning curve. Because anytime you change something, you're always, it's always going to slow progress.
Hmm.
Um, but if the change is worth it, then over time you're going to shoot right past that. So,
How do you go
I mean,
about figuring that out if it's worth it for you or not? You
trial and
like
error.
difficult
Yeah.
questions. There you go.
Yeah, trial and error, I guess. Yeah. I guess you have to just decide what's really, really important, or it just comes down to focusing. You can't try everything.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, but
sometimes you're like,
you have to pick right and this is the thing that technology is really kind of throwing a wrench into things here recently is like you can't there is like you do want to stay with the tried and true on some things, but like y- you don't want to. Okay, so here maybe if I phrase it this way, like you don't want to be so focused that you end up with blinders on,
right.
right? So how do you pick the which things to test and which ones not to test,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Well, you do always have to be changing because, if you're not
Hmm.
changing, you're going to be left behind. Um, so there's something, we get comfortable and we just,
Hmm.
the things that we know and we just stick with. But I think you do have to be open to changing things. Um, but I mean, I guess if you're constantly changing things and you're
Hmm.
constantly, doing, well, then you're never going to really get in a rhythm. You're never going to be efficient. So there is that balance, I think, of, you get into doing things and they're efficient. So you can't be against changing things. But if you're constantly changing things and you're never really good at one thing because you're constantly changing and seeking the absolute perfection, that, you know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Hmm.
I think if you're waiting for something to be perfect, then you're never going to be done. You're never going to be, you know what I mean? So like if you're constantly trying to, change things, and you're just not going to be efficient. And it comes back to, why are you in business? And I don't know, if you're in business, it should be to make money. I
Hmm.
mean, that comes back to values and all of that and your motivations. But, I don't know, the main reason of being in business is to make money and to, support yourself. And you have your other things that lead into that. But, you know,
Yeah, like getting to
I
make your own
have I have
decisions.
to remind myself. I have to remind myself of that. I'm in business. I'm doing this to, make money and provide, and, you know
Hmm.
whatever. So
Well, so like there are certain filters that you have to run things through in order to like come to spit out a decision on the other end. And so I would assume that focusing is one one of your big filters. Do you have any
so
other like must-haves? This it doesn't even have to be a product. It could be just like a project or something like this. Like are there certain things that are your main criteria points other than just like staying within a focused area that you want to focus on, if that
Yeah.
See
So
how many
I
times I can
say
put focus in one sentence.
I'd probably say focus so much because I'm such a procrastinator naturally
Mm-hmm.
I have to keep telling myself to focus, focus, focus. Um, and because that's probably the biggest thing I struggle with is focusing. Um, but yeah, no, as far as, criteria of jobs to take on other than
Or even which products to try and which ones not to, because like some people
right,
are so sealers are the easy one, right? Like you
right,
have like ease of application, you have how much protection does it give me? How fast can I apply it? How fast can I
right,
put it out in the field? Like though, and some of those things are in conflict with one another, right? So like something
right,
that's easier to apply is not in most cases going to give you as much durability, well, maybe not durability,
yeah,
protection as some other ones. So how do
right.
you like what are some of your criterias for those types of things?
I would probably say most of it's born out of if something's not working. You're trying something new because what you're doing now is not working. So that's probably to be
Mhm.
one of the big motivators. But once you have something that's working, I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But then
Mm.
but there's always something that's better. You know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
always something out there that's better. Um,
Mhm.
but I guess you have to, like we've talked about before, you have to determine, how much better. And is it 10 times better? Um, so if it's 10 times better, is it going to be worth it? If it's only one time better, if it's only, you know what I mean? Like if it's only just a
Mhm.
little bit better, is it worth that learning curve? Is it worth changing our entire process in our shop to just gain a little bit better? Um, you have to kind of personally make that choice. So if I have a guy that knows how to do something, is it that
Mhm.
much better that it's worth teaching him a whole nother process? Or is it better that we just keep doing the things that we're doing? Um, so I guess you have to
Mhm.
gauge on how much better it is, because of all the, it's the, domino effect of everything else in the business
Oh
it's
yeah.
going to affect. It's going to affect how we cure things, how we do things, how we, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Well, everybody's situation's so different, right? So,
it
like,
is,
you could
right,
look at the samples on, well, I don't have any samples here behind me, but like, you can look at the samples on your wall, and if I pulled the camera out there, like, I would look like I'm sitting in front of a rainbow. So, like,
right,
we have completely different, and so that is a good point. I mean, it's obvious in one sense that everybody's shop is going to be different. Um, but I'm always trying to see if I can find some commonalities, like if there's like a thought pattern or something that like because you could say all day long, well, if this product is like 10 times better, then well, of course you should probably switch to it.
right,
Well, how the fuck do you find out if it's 10 times better or not?
right.
You know,
Well,
like
so
there's
I
just so much.
So I think you can experiment with things. So you can like
Hmm.
bring something on and you can, if you really do think, okay, this is going to be 10 times better, well then, you bring it in and you set aside some time to do some testing and things like that. And then if you can determine, oh yeah, it is way better, well then now we've determined that okay, it's worth it. It's worth it to
Hmm.
change it. It's going to slow us down. It's going to slow us down for a while, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
We'll have to change some things, and that's a hard one to answer. Of how do you know? You don't really know. You just at some
Yeah.
point you do have to try some things, but I think you can't get lost in
Always
the
trying new
weeds.
things.
You can't get lost in the
Hmm.
weeds. It's like the same thing with technology. You get a new phone and it's 6 months better. There's this other phone that's a little
Hmm.
cooler. If you're constantly chasing that, and all, you know what I mean. You're going to be wasting a bunch of money and time. And uh,
Yeah.
and so it's the same thing with business. If you're constantly chasing all these little tiny things, it might be a little bit better. You're not going to have any consistency for one.
Hmm.
And I think consistency is huge, um, because I almost think it's better to be consistently okay than always all over the place, because people want consistency. They want something that's consistently good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because it's you can be really, really awesome, and then really, really suck at another job and really awesome, but nobody really knows if you're going to be good,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all over the place. And so if you're constantly changing things in your shop, there's no consistency. You're and for one, when you start having employees, they never know what to do. They don't ever
Yeah.
know their job because it's constantly changing. And so nobody can get good at anything because it's constantly changing. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I struggle with when I read into the different forums and all, is when people are offering advice on certain things, is that advice, unless you have the context to it, is very difficult to sift through, because you don't know, because what we do is eh, considerably affected by just ambient shop conditions.
Mhm.
You could have somebody that's in, like, take your shop for example. Like, if you were to give me advice without me having any context, with me being in Florida, that
Right,
things could go really wrong really quickly, right?
right.
And so, it, are there any are there any of those, like, processes that you have, or I don't want to zero out any products that you've had negative experiences with, but are there any processes or products that you've found that work really well in the extreme conditions that you get there, that you would kind of point people towards or recommend?
Ah. So as far as my workflow processes go, I think we're pretty fortunate because now we can have extreme temperatures here in Alaska. It's cold, it's super cold,
Hmm.
it's cold. It'd be, I would say, it's probably more like Minnesota, where I'm at here. So you can get super cold in the winter, but then well, maybe done not quite as hot, but it gets warm. But my shop stays at like 60, 65 degrees year round. So
Oh.
when we talk about the winters, you might have to do things differently than the summer. Not so much here,
Hmm.
because my shop is nice and heated, and so in the winter it might be 20 below outside, but my shop still stays 65. Um, so my workflow doesn't really change, and my it doesn't really get much more than 70 in the summers here. Um, and so my shop doesn't get any hotter than 65, maybe 70 if we're rolling up the doors. So
Oh
that
my
makes things
gosh.
very, very easy for me. So you guys that are in Florida or Arizona or Texas, that you know if your shops aren't climate controlled, you don't not running AC, your shop is 90 degrees. And I wouldn't personally know how to deal with that. I don't
Yeah.
even know how I would work. I went down to Brandon Gore's shop, and it's been like 6 years ago, and when he was in
Hmm.
Arizona. And I remember it was in, when was it, May? I think it was in May. And it was like 95 degrees in his shop. And I was like, I couldn't hardly do anything.
Dying in the corner.
I was just standing around watching because it's like, how do you guys work in this? This is
Oh yeah.
ridiculous. Um, and so I was like, man, I don't know how anybody gets anything done in this weather. And he had the shop doors open. It's like,
Hmm.
why do you have the shop door open? We need to be running the AC. And so I don't have that up here. So that probably makes things a lot easier when it comes for, sealing and stuff. Of course, with me, when I was using water-based sealers and things, that it would take forever because unless I cranked the heat in my shop and got it
Hmm.
75, 80 degrees, it was one coat a day, which, I mean, it would take you 4 or 5 days to seal something, which is ridiculous.
Hmm.
Unless it's something like Omega that dries really fast, but still it's only,
Yeah.
then I can do that. um, But the other ones, the older, H12 and XS 327, and I was like one coat a day, and it's just not you just can't do that. There's no way you can produce any type of work
Yeah,
taking
see,
a week.
I completely forgot to ask Brent because he's up in Canada. It gets cold as stupid there, but he
Yeah,
uses excess. And I should have asked him like how he goes about doing that because
right,
that would be interesting to know. Because like a lot of the guys that are up in the either the northern part of the states or in Canada, like that's a different monster than here. So like you have people that are giving all these recommendations for sealers and all you got to do is this that, and I'm like, you have lost your mind if you think that that's going to work where I live.
right,
Like
right.
that would have flashed off like half an hour ago.
Right, right.
um,
And the humidity, it's super dry up here. So we don't deal with
oof, not here.
humidity. Um, and so I guess I know looking at forums and all the things that the problems that people
Hmm.
deal with, I'm super thankful I don't have to deal with any of that. And my stuff is actually really easy when I look at how other people have to do things. I'm very thankful that I live in Alaska. It's the best state in the nation. So,
Yeah, see, like I didn't even think about it like that because, like, yeah, I mean, like I can easily during the summer months because, like, we just took the ceiling out of the shop and we have the attic above that, so I'm basically working in an oven now. So
oh
I'll
man,
easily click over 90, 95 degrees in the shop, plus easily go over 70, 80% humidity,
right.
easily. Um, so maybe I need to find
So
some
it
people to
sounds like
talk
you
to
need a
that
move.
work on
Sounds
that.
like you need a move.
I
Your
know.
business would
Apparently, that's
be
a thing.
your, your business would be much much easier if you move somebody with a more moderate climate. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we've thought about like putting up the radiant barriers and then putting up the spray foam and then sheetrocking over that and then
yeah,
climate controlling it, but like I just don't know that that's worth the because it's relatively good here when it gets to be quote unquote winter.
yeah,
Um, I just don't know because I like keeping the shop. It used to be a source of like I was always so self-conscious about it, like, "Oh, my shop's still here at the house, it's in our garage, blah, blah, blah," and I
yeah,
was like the more I think about it, like, I don't have when I said overhead earlier, I totally misspoke, I was meaning rent, but, like, I don't have to worry about rent. It
right,
takes me less than a minute to walk to the shop. I
right,
have a banging setup. Like, I have a smaller footprint, obviously, but I can make
right.
almost the same thing that anybody else in all these other shops can make.
Oh yeah,
But for some reason, there's this stigma of, well, it's in your garage. And I'm
right.
still kind of working through that, but it's one of those things where it is what it is.
Right, and if you can make what you need to make in that space, then I wouldn't worry about it, until you feel like you outgrow it. And um,
Says Mr.
I
Fancy
always
Pants with the shop.
right, right. Well, I did the same thing. I started in my three-car garage, and I did it for
Hmm.
3 years in and out of that garage. And in the summertime, it was a lot easier because I could roll up the shop doors and push everything. I have a big paved, basically parking lot for a driveway. It's massive.
Hmm.
Super thankful for. But so I could roll all my carts out into the driveway as long as it wasn't raining. I could set up, pop up tents or whatever. Um, and I had at one point I had three kitchens in my three-car garage, and every night I would shove all the carts in there, and you could not walk. I couldn't go through the garage and walk through the man door. I had to shut the door from the outside and walk around. But it
Yeah.
was yeah, it was summertime, and so I could roll them out and then work. And I think back on that, and I'm like, that was insane. Um,
Hmm.
but and I just waited until I just couldn't do it anymore, until it was costing me money to work out of my garage. And so I always tell people I always tell don't expand until it's costing you money not to. Don't buy something for your business until it's costing you, unless you feel like it's costing you money not to, or unless you just have you've saved up, you have a business savings account, and you're like, hey, at this
Hmm.
point, we're going to save up money, and when we have that money, we're going to buy this, it'll increase our production or whatever. um, but don't just think you have to expand or move into another shop until it's costing you not to. Um, and you can focus things however you want to, but and prioritize. But I moved into another shop out, and I shared it with a buddy of mine. It was like a 25 by 60, and it was a crazy arrangement. It's a friend of mine. We got along really well, and he was like equipment maintenance, like dump trucks and backhoes and everything. And he was a mechanic, and it was the
Yeah.
worst. I mean, if you think about it, it was the worst combination of businesses. I would have been much better off to partner up with a woodworker. But because, I would have this shop,
Eh,
and a lot of times I would
sort
have it
of.
myself. Well, it was great, but I mean, it was great. We got along great, but we did that for 2 years. But at some
Hmm.
points, like I would have 60 foot of shop when he was not in there, but then he'd pull in a dump truck. It would take up half the shop for, a week. And it's like, well, you can't hardly work, so what am I supposed to do? I'm just like not supposed to work. And it was his shop just as much as mine.
Yeah.
But it was great, super low overhead. We split the rent. Rent was super cheap, and it worked for 2 years. But at the end of that 2 years, I was getting pretty busy. I had lined up quite a few large projects, and it was going to cost me a ton of money not to move into another shop. I mean, I couldn't
Hmm.
just, when you sell these jobs, you can't just not produce them for 2 months because he has a big, slope rig in there that's like 50 foot long. Um, so it's going to cost me a lot of money not to move. And so then I moved in the shop that I've been in now for the last 2.5 years. And I moved in here by myself. And that was a huge job, huge rent, super scary. Didn't know how I was going to pay the
Yeah.
rent. I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent. Um, but you just do it. And once you have that, and you force yourself.
Hmm.
Once you have to do it, you have to do it. And when I was comfortable in the other one, paying almost zero, right? I mean, it's so cheap to think about now. Um, there's no motivation to do much more until I had to, but it was good.
Yeah.
Uh, Always looking back, it was super scary. You never know how it's going to work, but I think I expanded at the right time because I had to. I
Hmm.
couldn't afford to stay there any longer. It was going to cost me a ton of money. Um, And so, but if I would have moved into my own shop before that point, I would have been really struggling because I wouldn't have had work lined up. I wouldn't have been at that point in, generating, leads and things like that to where I could have jumped. It would have been a much harder jump. So I think that gets a lot of people in trouble is they think they have to expand. Oh, I'm just in my garage. If I'm going to be taken seriously, I gotta have this. I gotta have that. I gotta have a big
Yeah.
showroom. And then you overextend yourself, and it's really stupid because if you do all that, but you don't have the work to back it up, or you don't have the, you might be able to hustle and generate it, but it's going to be much, much harder. So don't do it until
Yeah.
it's costing you not to.
Yeah. I
There's
don't know.
also
There's
fake it till you make it, and if you don't jump, so
I
people
was
have
just about to
different,
nail you
yeah.
to the wall about that. Oh, you
Yeah,
mean like when you had this great contracting thing and you said, "No, no more. I'm gonna do concrete." You mean kinda like that?
yeah. So
But, I mean, that's the hard part, right? Is just, like,
right,
figuring out, like, when to jump, when not to jump. Am I far enough
right,
along? Am I busy enough along? Do I have enough coming in? Maybe I should just go
yeah,
ahead and just hold my nose and jump in, like, those are the hard things, and, like, that fear, man, is just, like,
yeah.
when do you acknowledge it because it's gonna keep your dumbass alive, and when do you be like, "No, I need to do it," and that shit is so hard because, like, just
Yeah.
what you like,
But I
literally,
would
like, what you
say,
just said
I
is like,
would
"I have
say
to have a
when I,
showroom."
yeah. Well, I would
Mhm.
say like when I jumped in and said, "Hey, I'm not going to do contracting anymore. I'm going to do this." I didn't go out and sign a lease on this shop with
Mhm.
this office. I in my garage. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yes, it was a jump, but I didn't jump straight in to where I wanted to be in 7 years because that would have been
Mhm.
suicide. There's no way I could afford this shop, not having any work coming in. Um, so yeah, it has to be. you have to keep it, I can't remember, I can't think of words, but you have to scale appropriately.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you have to jump, but at the same time, then you can't scale until, you have to scale appropriately.
Yeah, I think I wonder if it's more applicable to say like with the jump analogy of going from one thing to another, not necessarily scale, right? So like you could go
Right.
from being like a lawyer to a carpenter. Like that's not, it's a jump, but it's not now going from like for the same example, going from being a lawyer to having a 10,000 square foot woodworking shop like that saying that that's a jump might be a little bit of a stretch. Like you're
Right.
jumping right off the side of a cliff with that. Unless you just have
Unless,
like, I mean, you could be like,
yeah,
maybe you're like a New York lawyer and you've just got buckets of cash. I
yeah.
mean, that could
So
be it too, but
if you have tons of money to throw at it, and you could
yeah.
survive for 3 years without not bringing in any work, well, then the risk is a lot lower. Um,
Hmm.
but if you don't have any money, like when I jumped, I didn't have any money, and so that's why I tell people,
Yeah.
man, if you're going to try to make at least save up a little bit, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of the stress off of it. Um, because it was super stressful. Um,
So like have you always like do you keep so like when you so one of the things that you would recommend for people that like they're going to kind of say scale up as opposed to jump because that might be a better way to kind of look at it is like wait till you're just like busting at the seams and then level up and then just kind of repeat that process until you get
that's
to the
what I
point where you want to
that's
be.
yeah, that's where I personally you know believe, and really try and
Hmm.
do it my own. Now there's other people who, they just take that risk and they just go for it, and they're like, this is where we want to be, this is what we need. But to me, that's just a lot more stress than needed. And I guess it all depends on, how motivated people are. And some people need that super high
Hmm.
stress to motivate them in order to do what they need to do. I think that's true. Even for myself, when you get comfortable in business, it's easy just to sit back, and so
Hmm.
it's when you stretch yourself and you're like, we're going to do this. Well, now you have to, and it's when you
Yeah.
have to do it is when now you're forced. You have to. So it's a huge motivator. Um, so when you get comfortable and where you don't have to really do anything because everything's really easy.
Hmm.
So if you want to grow, you really have to, do things that force you to actually have to do it. So jumping
Do you have
into, so like when I moved into this shop, I had to,
hmm.
but it was a massive jump. I went from $750 a month in split rent, so it was like $1,500 a month for that old shop. And so my half was 750 to
Hmm.
2750. So that was a massive jump in shop
A
rent.
little bit.
Just a little bit, and that's why I said it was super scary. I'm like, oh man, how in the world am I going to do it? And so
Hmm.
then that's one of those things. Well, you just have to do it. You don't have any choice. Um, so you have to make it work. And so yeah, I don't know if I have all the answers, but that's where I'd really try, and that's what I try and do, is not to expand, not to buy things until I need to, for my business. Because not to say I've always succeeded. I've made some last minute, spontaneous purchases, bought different tools and things that I didn't really need. And I'm like, oh, that's probably wasn't the best, but whatever. You just, you learn from it, move on. But
Are there any like well, I'm like tool purchases, for example. Like what are some of the tools that you've bought that you're like, I'm so glad that I bought this.
oh man, well, probably the big one is our big compressor. We have a 3-phase compressor. So when I leveled up and bought that actually really good compressor that can run whatever 50 CFM at
Mm-hmm.
100 psi, that allowed us to run multiple air tools at once. My guy could be polishing in the booth with an air polisher, and I know I have plenty of air to do whatever I need to do. Run plasma cutter, run a air nozzle to blow stuff off, and nailers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the big one for our shop, is having a good air compressor. Um, and then my forklift for us, when I bought the forklift,
Mm.
that was huge. I mean, I can't imagine not having it for what we do. The other one for my metal work would be my horizontal bandsaw. So that now, it's just awesome. We use it all the time, but for chopping stuff down. But and a lot of this stuff you can get by without it. You know,
Yeah.
but it's just so
It buzz.
once you have those things, you're like, oh man, they're so
Mm-hmm.
nice. I have a welder set up, and things like that. Buying combination tools can sometimes seem like a super good idea at the time, but I really think that it's best to buy tools that are really good at one thing instead of buying, because you're never gonna reconfigure a tool. It's just not very, unless you have a really small shop and it's a space is a big thing. So that is where it can.
Yep,
But if
that's
you
me.
have the space, buying tools that are good for what they're good for is just so much more efficient because you save so much time. Like I don't, I have my welder and it's set up how I want it. I don't ever change it. Yes, it can do, it can do TIG if I need it to do TIG. It's multi,
Mm-hmm.
but I never change it over. I mean, you just don't. It takes too much time. You got to swap bottles. It's easier just to, when you need something, you can grab it, turn it on, and go. You always have it set up. Um, but that's just efficiencies in a shop. And we have these, sanders and bandsaw and stuff, and it's always set up this same way. So when we're
Mm-hmm.
sanding down foam and things, and so if we were constantly having to change it out and reconfigure it, I mean, it would take the guy 15, 20 minutes to reconfigure it. Well, I could have been done. I could have done it by hand by then. So that
Yeah.
cool tool doesn't save you any time unless it's set up and ready to go.
Yeah. That was one of the things where like I don't really have much of a choice because my shop is so small. So like I
Right,
do a lot of the wood stuff. So like I currently have a planer and a joiner. Well, that takes up a lot of square footage in the shop, and I spend
right,
most of the time just rolling those little fuckers around the shop because they're in the way.
right.
um, so that's a good example of where like somebody in your situation is going to have a completely different set of problems than somebody that's say in my situation.
Right.
Because those combination tools, depending on what they are, as long as they're just really good at whatever the
Yeah.
combination thing is, like that, we're looking at getting a joiner planer combo right now, and like that's going to save me one. It's just an all around better tool than what I have now, and it's going to save me space.
Oh yeah.
Like space is a premium thing in my shop. Like so small
Right.
shops, like putting things up on the wall, hanging things from the ceiling, putting it on
Right.
wheels. Like those aren't some of those things aren't really things that you have to worry about, which is one of the reasons why I do envy shops like yours. And like I want to get out
Right.
of this small shop, but it's like I don't want
Yeah.
that $2,700 or whatever hanging over my head.
Yeah. And that's just all where you go, like and that when I was in my garage, the big thing that I had to do was, okay, what do we have to get done today? And you really have to batch tasks. So,
Oh
once
yeah.
you pull out that planer, once you pull out the table saw, you're going to be doing all table saw stuff,
Hmm.
until you put it away, because if you're constantly having to pull it back out, do this, pull it back out, push it back, you waste
Yep.
so much time. And so we do the same thing here, like we get in a bunk of melamine and we just spend the next 2 hours or hour, or whatever, cutting down form strips, and batching them up. And you just find, things that you have to batch your tasks. And we're
Do
always
you
not the
like doing
best.
that a lot in your shop, even though you have the space? Like batching tasks quite a bit?
I do. I just feel
Or
it's
not
so
as
much
much?
more efficient. Now, do
Hmm.
we? now Michael will listen to this and be like, "Hey, we don't do that. We're
Bullshit.
yeah, we're all over the place." um, but I do try. We do try and do it as much as we can. Obviously, there's going to be some days where we like to try and do a lot of forming. So we have a big 8x20 form table and another 5x10 steel table. They're both steel, but I like to try and spend. He does a lot of the forming, so I like to just get a lot of forming done, and then when we have um, forming done. If it's like 3 or 4 projects all formed down on the table, then we have one big casting day
Hmm.
because it's just more efficient. Because if you're forming a little
Yeah.
project and now we're switching to batching concrete and casting it, now we have to babysit it, and then we're trying to form something else over here. You're just not efficient. Your brain's all over the place. And
Yeah.
I can have him forming stuff for the day, and then I can focus on other things that only I can do. But if we're constant like, hey, we're going to start mixing concrete, and then I have to break away from what I'm doing and start casting something. And so I do like to do that. We like to try and break cast up. We're going to form this day, 2 days, whatever. Unless obviously there's times where projects have to get out in a certain timeline, so you just have to form it,
Hmm.
cast it, get it done. But we usually have enough in our queue that we're going to spend this entire week forming, building sink molds, getting all these projects formed up, and then next week we're going to cast. So that also helps when you schedule jobs out further and give yourself some time. Guys that are
What do you typically
constantly,
give people for your lead time?
typically right now we're saying like a month or so. It all depends on the project. So it's
Hmm.
tough when it's new construction, and once cabinets get installed, they need countertops in so everybody else can keep doing their job. Tile guys can do backsplash, and so long lead times don't work the best for that kind of work.
Why do you think that
Remodels,
is?
look, because everything
You
just
know,
needs to
because
get
like,
done. Yeah.
right, but like, maybe it's the more artistic areas where they're just like, because like, I know this isn't 100% applicable. Maybe this is more equivalent to like the remodel that you're just talking or
Yeah.
about to start talking about, and I really interrupted. Where like your lead times can be a little bit longer, but like,
Right.
do you ever watch Cam? He has Blacktail Studios on
Yeah. Yeah.
YouTube.
I do. Yeah. I see.
So he talks about it like he's got like 6 months to a year lead time.
Well, when
Like,
you're
obviously, I'm not
building,
saying that we do
so
countertops like that, but like,
right, right. So like when I'm building like tables and stuff, I have a big dining room table to do, and
mhm,
I told him it would be like middle of end of November. So that's what's 2 months. Um, because that's not something that needs to be installed,
mhm,
before anybody else. That's a custom piece, or like fire tables and things like that. But I'd say my normal lead time, so probably I'd still say 80% of what we do is countertops. And I say that, whatever. But um, and so that usually is like I usually tell people 2 weeks from the time we are able to template. And that's a pretty quick turnaround.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
it is.
Now, when our workload gets higher, it can change. Um, and when I'm working with newer builders, I like to we just keep communication up. Like I need to know a month in ahead when cabinets are going to be installed. Like cabinets are coming. Give me that like month heads up or as much heads up as you can, because obviously if you call me up and we talked 6 months ago about this project, and you call me up and say, "Hey, cabinets were installed yesterday. Can you come over and template?" Well, no, I
Mhm.
I can't, and no, it's not going to be 2 weeks from the time you call me and tell me you're ready. It's what I
Yeah.
mean. So there's that. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it's not necessarily 2 weeks, but usually we're keeping in good contact. So I know the cabinets were going to be installed 4 weeks ago. I knew 4 weeks ago that the cabinets were going to be installed the first part of this month, and so I already had that on my calendar. So for me, that's like a 6 week lead time that I've already had a
Mhm.
good six. So I've been able to schedule that out, and I know they're coming on the first part of the month, and then I know they're going to expect them in 2 weeks after that, and so I've had a long time to kind of prepare. Um, but Other custom projects though, like furniture and things, well, that all depends on what's involved. If
Yeah,
it's
see, but that's the interesting thing about that is because okay, so we say custom furniture. Okay, well these countertops are custom.
they
So
are.
why don't we apply the same mentality? I
Well,
wonder if it
maybe,
has more to do
yeah,
with the construction side of it, because that's just the chaos of
it probably
construction.
could, but I guess if there's a lot of like super custom artistic elements to the countertops, now that's where I'm
Hmm.
getting at, where we're just making basic countertops, and if I'm
Yeah.
just forming up and we're pouring this and there's no like real design elements per se in them, we're not like adding these custom
Hmm.
design features. Well, then yeah, now it's just we're pouring rectangles. And so it's not, yeah, let's say
Yeah.
it's custom templated to your site, but it's really not that custom. I mean,
Oh
if we're
yeah, no,
honest,
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
it's really not that
Oh yeah,
custom,
those people.
yeah.
Oh, freaking functional art, man. That
Yeah,
shit just sends me through the roof when I hear people say that. I'm
yeah.
like, go ahead, show
But
me. Where is
yeah,
this art that you're talking about?
yeah. And so, when we talk about custom, countertops, I mean, a lot of times when you're honest, they're really not that custom.
Oh yeah, no.
Is that shooting my marketing in the foot? Probably, maybe so, but it really isn't. I mean, when we're just making a rectangle, it's really not that custom. I mean,
Yeah.
it may be a custom color, um, but you know, it's like when we're adding different design elements, that's where it's more custom.
Hmm.
Things that they can't get anywhere else, or things that they want specifically that's not standard. Well, then that would be a little more custom. And so
Yeah.
those things
No,
take a
more in
little
relation.
longer. Yeah,
Yeah, more in relation to some of like the Dusty Creek type stuff,
yeah,
because like inherently in that style is time. Like there's no way to get
right,
around it. You have to fill the voids, right? And whether you do
right.
that two times or three
So
times or one time
there's a
is.
lot of there's a lot to that, and it is
Hmm.
time for processing. But man, maybe I'm letting off some secrets, but part of the advantage to that finish is that it's not consistent, and there's so much inconsistency in it, and that's part of the beauty in that finish. So it's from a
It is, yes.
fabrication standpoint, it can be easier, um, because any little flaw is not a flaw. So now, where when you're doing super clean, trying to do super clean concrete,
Mm-mm.
any flaw and it's trash. So you're
Yep.
remaking it. So with these stone finishes, Dusty Creek type finishes,
Hmm.
that's no longer a case. So now it becomes easier. So now, you don't have to maybe be as careful forming. It doesn't have to be as clean. Your caulk joints in your corners, you don't even have to caulk if you don't want
Yeah, I
to.
don't even
You
call
know what I mean?
those.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, like,
Just
right.
throw
And
that
so
shit in
now,
there.
yeah, so now it's actually easier. So now there's not near as much time involved because your molds don't have to be pristinely clean. That your caulks,
Hmm.
your corners don't have to be caulked super perfectly. All of that stuff. So now it's a lot easier. And so things that would have to be recast and other finishes are good to go. And so to
Yeah, and
me,
it's
we actually prefer that because from a fabrication standpoint, it's way easier. That
maybe
finish is
I think it. Yeah, I think I'm probably just a snob when it comes to that, though. I mean, because like, I'll go ahead and put it
yeah,
out there.
yeah,
Like, when somebody only puts one layer of grout on there after doing, whether it's
yeah,
like I don't know much about the style. I only know
yeah,
like with how I do
right.
my equivalent is like I
And
just
I make
like
I make my own powders anyway, so I guess it is Dusty
so.
Creek because I
But
learned
like, if
from them.
you're
But
only
yeah,
putting one layer of grout on there, or one color of grout, and you wet process it off and you call it good, like I'm just like,
yeah,
you late mother. Like I just can't help it. I cannot help it. I think it has to
yeah,
be at least three layers.
yeah,
But like, so that's why I'm kind of looking at it like, I just don't like doing it because like I have to grout it and then I have to process it. I have to grout it and then I have to process it. And then like, so if I say that I need to do it a minimum of three times,
yeah,
you see,
yeah,
so I guess maybe I'm doing it
yeah.
differently than you are.
Yeah, it would be different than we usually are the one. We're usually not one and done. Usually it's twice. but it wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yep.
be two different colors. Sometimes it is. We
Mm-hmm.
do that. Like we'll do a basic fill, and then we do another one. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
ours are pretty deep vein, so we're adding superfine sand. So we do a sanded slurry for our first
Yep.
main fill. Then we cut that off,
Mm-hmm.
and then we do an unsanded to catch any of the
Yeah.
little finers. And it does do that layering. But that's kind of our basic. But still, to me though, that's easier than having to recast a piece because it had some imperfection.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that whole finish to me is much easier. It's easier for I'd say anyone to do it. They're still skilled. Like my guy Michael is super skilled, but it's a much easier for him to do a dusted finish like that and be super
Mm-hmm.
successful than it would be for him to do like a super clean GFRC, which we don't do a lot of. Um, Anytime we're
Yeah. I don't
doing
do that. I refuse
cleaner,
to do
like,
that.
yeah, cleaner modern finishes, we're doing some sort of high spray or modeling or something like that
Yep.
because shooting for that perfect finish is just almost impossible. It's stupid. And if you want that, just go buy Corian or, whatever.
Or
Um,
pay Martin to do it, and he'll do it for you.
yeah, yeah, he'll ship it from the UK.
Yeah.
Um,
All
but
that pretty shit he makes me sick.
yeah,
Like,
I know. That's, I guess I just don't even do that. So that's not even
oh
a,
yeah, no, no, me neither.
but it's not worth the time.
Well, I'm just worried that I'm gonna get because like I like using the colors and like if you get like let's say that like warm gray for me is just notorious for this. You get like a red streak randomly over here. Like fuck, well there goes that piece.
Yeah.
Um, I've tried putting the warm gray in water and then mixing it in there, and I've tried putting it in dry mixing it, and I've tried that, and I've tried all sorts of ways. It just like I don't know, warm gray just gives me trouble. So
Yeah, it's a lot of times we talk about things from the outside. You look at people's businesses, and you're like, oh, they're super successful, but you don't really know
mhm.
because you don't know their books, you don't know how it's all put on. But and so I like to sometimes maybe people think I don't struggle with things, but maybe I talk about them because it's what I actually need to do,
Yeah.
yeah, than what I
I mean,
actually
the
do.
thing is, yeah, with social media, it's just made it so like you have everybody claims like, oh, that this person's a hater, that person's a hater, and it's
Yeah,
like just because they're offering their viewpoint doesn't mean that they're a hater. Like they could have very
right,
valid points, and like we're all
right,
struggling with something.
yeah.
Um, which I hope this helps with. I don't know how many people will actually end up listening to this or any of the other episodes. Um,
Oh, they will, man.
because
They
like when
will.
I
They
listen,
will. Yeah.
we'll see. I still have to
Yeah.
finish building out the website. Apparently, to do affiliate marketing, you have to have a website linked with it. So now I have to build a website. It's like, and then I have to submit the podcast for approval, and then I have to edit the videos.
Yeah.
It's just becoming a
Yeah.
much bigger thing than I thought it would end up being. Uh,
Well, just
so
keep
so I
at
don't
it,
know.
man. You just, yeah.
I am. This is episode like 7, I think. I think I'm
Wow.
up to 7 already. I say like
Nice.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, you're number 6, and I've got like
Okay.
6 other people scheduled too. So
Nice.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you
Well,
get
yeah,
something
I,
out
I
of it.
actually, I actually look forward to hearing all the guys you've had on. I know a few of them that I know of. Be just interesting. I know
Mhm.
what we've talked about, and I feel like I just rambled. So, hopefully, the other guys have done a little more than just ramble on. But
Yeah.
well, I
But
think
yeah.
it's funny. It's funny because in real life, people know me pretty quiet guy. But when I get on the
Uh-huh.
phone or get on things like this, I can usually ramble on and ramble. And I don't know if any of it makes any sense, but I feel like I talk a lot. So
But that's what like I you mentioned it like twice while we were talking, but like that's where the good stuff is cuz like
yeah,
it's it, I can't remember where I heard it, but it's just like it's you have to ask like why or how. I can't remember which one it is, but like 7 times. And when you get to that 7th time, then that's where you really get the answer.
yeah,
Um so like when people go off on tangents, so like when you were talking, like then you really start to get the good stuff because like
there's no way for me to know the perfect question to ask you. Like, it just doesn't exist.
Right.
But you'll get to that answer of the question that I should have asked just by you going with whatever you feel like you should talk about. But it has to, like, you have to feel comfortable enough to actually do that, which I'm glad that you did, because we've never talked
Yeah.
before, obviously. So
Yeah. Well, I didn't know I would feel. I was actually pretty nervous, um, especially being
oh,
on video like this. This makes it worse because now I'm like, oh man, I look like a
that's
total
yeah. Now
doofus.
you know what Cody was talking about.
Yeah.
He spent half the time sitting there like this. I'm like, dude,
Yeah. Yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
Like, if you think you're nervous, imagine how nervous I am.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the one that's got to come up with the fucking questions and make sure that this thing keeps going on without sounding like a complete fucking idiot. Like, so,
Uh,
yeah. But I mean, now
all
you
right,
know what
man.
it's like,
Yeah.
and if
Yeah.
we decide to do it in the future, then we'll do it in the future. You could have just said that. That's fine. Yeah, no, we're good to end whenever you want.
Yeah. No, no, I was
It's
just thinking,
abrupt, so
yeah. No, I didn't want to make it abrupt. That's why I sent you that. But now it's
no,
abrupt.
you're
So
good. All of the episodes so far is just like,
all right, I gotta
we'll
go.
stop there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
Because what I'll just add like a little thing on the end of it and just be like,
Yeah.
we decided to stop. Y'all can deal with it.
Yeah.
If anybody even listens this long, who knows?
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I didn't even feel like it had been this long. And I was like, oh man, it's like 10 o'clock. I gotta get going.
Yeah. Yeah, we're at 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, it's been good, man. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you decided to end up doing this, and I hope it was
Yeah.
fun and worth your time. I know you don't really get a huge amount of things out of this because I have nothing to really offer. But
No, it's good. I like chit chatting like this. It's good. A lot of times I just like to do it because I vocalize things that I need to work on more. Yeah, it is nice to be appreciated.
Thanks for listening in, guys. I really appreciate it. If you found this episode helpful, a review, like, thumbs up, etc., all that social goodness would help considerably. It helps this podcast get discovered and lets me know how I can get better to actually help everyone improve. If this episode was helpful and you want to help support the channel, using the affiliate links in the description is an easy, no-cost way to you of doing that. Thanks again, everyone, and I look forward to seeing or hearing from you in the next episode.